Hi, just testing. Testing. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. We want to have enough time to hear from our candidates, so come on in and get a seat, and we'll start as close to 7 as we can. I'm hearing up at the front, it might be a bit quiet. Testing.
I'll try not to tip off the end here, right by my chair.
It's quite a small little stage.
Testing.
When I was in school, we were doing a production, and I was dressed as Raggedy Ann, and I was the narrator, and I was sitting on the stage, and my chair slid off the side of the stage, and I went flying. And of course, to everybody, it looks like this big rag doll flying through
Like
there.
you meant to do that.
Yeah, ended up with a concussion.
Oh dear.
So I'm a little.
Testing. Okay. How's that for the front? Okay. Photo opportunities. Welcome, everybody. To make sure we have enough time to hear from our candidates and a meet and greet, I'll invite you to take your seats. That seat's still free. So good evening and welcome to the Nanaimo Lanceville All Candidates Forum, which is being co-hosted by the Regional District of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Regional Hospital District. My name is Vanessa Craig, and I'm the chair of the Regional District of Nanaimo Board. I represent Gabriola and DeCourcy Islands on the Regional District Board. And I'm pleased to be opening the forum this evening on behalf of the RDN and NRHD boards. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we're gathering today on the unceded territory of the Nanaimo First Nation, and we are grateful for their stewardship of these lands since time immemorial. I'd like to recognize that we have a few of our RDN board members in the audience, including Chair Ian Thorpe, who's chair of the Hospital District, as well as Mayor Krogh, and numerous RDN staff. So welcome to everybody. The purpose of this forum is to provide residents the opportunity to hear from your MLA candidates and to gather the information you may need to make an informed decision for the provincial election on October 19th. We hope you find this opportunity engaging and helpful with your decision making. We have a few housekeeping items to cover. Washrooms are located over on the right side of the hall. My right side, your left side. Please help yourself to a bottle of water, which are located along the side of the wall as well. We'll try and end the forum promptly at 8:30, and then the candidates will be welcome to mingle and talk to you if you'd like to stay and answer or talk to some of the candidates afterwards. The forum this evening will be recorded and later posted to the RDN YouTube web channel. The forums will also be broadcast by Czech News, Nanaimo News Now, and Rogers Community TV. At this time, we also ask you to request to avoid connecting to the guest Wi-Fi and to make sure that your devices are set in silent mode. We recognize there may be some urgent instances or calls that you need to take, so please just step outside to take your call and then rejoin us when you're able. The forum is a nonpartisan event. Please refrain from waving campaign banners or signs, and this is meant to be a respectful opportunity to hear from all the candidates. So we encourage respectful dialogue among our candidates as well as from the audience. The moderators, who are over here, will conduct the meeting, and they have the responsibility to interrupt the proceedings and enforce the House rules and forum format if needed, and they'll go over the House rules at the beginning. And we ask that candidates and audience members respect the authority of the moderators. So, I'd like to welcome and thank our MLA candidates for joining us today. Dale Parker, who is here as a Conservative candidate, Sheila Malcolmson, who is here as our NDP candidate, and Shirley Lambrecht, who is here as the Green candidate. I'd also like to thank our media partners, Czech News, Nanaimo News Now, Pattison Media, and Rogers Community TV. And also recognize that we're joined by Derek Kilbourne from the Gabriola Sounder, who will also be covering this as well. Today's moderators are Kim Smythe. Kim Smythe is the former president and CEO of the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce and now operates a consultancy working with both government and the private sector. With a career rooted in strategic problem solving, advocacy, and network building, Kim also specializes in strengthening nonprofits, social enterprise, and creative entrepreneurship to help drive regional economic development. Welcome, Kim. Thank you for joining us today. And our second moderator is Jason Yoakum. Upon accepting the position of CEO at the Vancouver Island Real Estate Board, Jason Yoakum moved from Saskatchewan to Nanaimo in January of 2022. That must have been a nice escape. Bringing over 30 years' experience in various levels of the real estate and housing sectors. In Saskatchewan, Jason served as CEO of the Saskatchewan Realtors Association, the Saskatoon Region Association of Realtors, and the Saskatoon and Region Home Builders. His background in housing includes experience in construction and development of residential and commercial property. Jason is the current director on the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce and formerly served as a director of the Greater Saskatoon Chamber of Commerce, including a term as chair 2016 to 2017. And our RDN staff member, Lisa Robotham, is filling the role of timekeeper this evening. So she will be keeping you on schedule. So I'll turn it over to our moderators and thanks everybody again for coming.
Thanks very much, Chair Craig. Before we provide the candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves and their party's platform, we need to review the format we'll be following this evening. So, number one, audience members will not be able to ask questions this evening. Residents were invited to submit questions in advance by online submission or email prior to the forum. Questions were selected from the submissions received and regional topics that have been brought to the RDN and NRHD boards over the past year. Thank you to everyone who took the time to submit questions.
We asked each candidate to respect the clock. We will have a timer to help you and will hold up a 30-second sign to wrap up your opening statement or responses to the questions. Our timekeeper will hold up the 30-second sign as your time draws to a close.
Each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and give an opening statement on their party's election platform.
Following the round of introductions, we will ask candidates the predetermined questions. Candidates were provided the questions in advance and have had time to prepare their responses.
Each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to the question without interruptions from other candidates or members of the public in attendance. The timekeeper will provide a 30-second signal, as she just indicated, and then will raise the stop sign card when the candidate's time is up. We will vary the order in which each candidate answers. We'll simply rotate. We'll go alphabetically to start with, and then jump on as we go along.
Following the round of responses to each question, candidates will have the opportunity for a brief 1-minute rebuttal. We ask the candidates hold up their green rebuttal sign should they want to offer a rebuttal.
And on rebuttals, there's a total of 2 rebuttals allowed per candidate for the evening. And at the close of the question and answer period, candidates will have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
Candidates are expected to speak with a courteous and professional tone and are only permitted to speak when it is their turn. Candidates must also refrain from making any sounds or gestures that may be considered distracting while the others are speaking. Failure to behave appropriately will result in a warning from us moderators.
Finally, audience sounds and gestures. I won't demonstrate any of those for you here to be a bad example. Sounds and gestures to show agreement or disagreement are permitted, however, they must be made in a courteous tone and manner and be very brief so as not to cut into the time the candidates have. It must only happen when the candidates are not speaking. If it becomes disruptive, the moderator reserves the right to ask the audience to refrain from certain behaviors.
We will be beginning with candidate introductions and opening remarks by alphabetical order of last name, starting with number 1, Shirley Lambrecht, BC Green Party, then Sheila Malcolmson, BC NDP, and Dale Parker with the BC Conservatives. Thank you, everyone, for your opening statements. Yep, Shirley.
First of all, I just want to acknowledge that I am very grateful to be living, playing, and working on the traditional territories Nanaimo people and the surrounding Coast Salish people. We live in an amazingly beautiful place, and I believe it is worth protecting, and I believe it's worth fighting for. I relocated here from Saskatchewan in 2009 with my daughter in tow and 2 dogs, and we made Nanaimo our home. There have been times where I've needed to leave the area for work reasons or family duty. I had my mother, who was residing in Nelson, become ill, so I did leave Nanaimo for a year and a half and promptly returned as soon as she was back on her feet. And I've always just loved it here. And again, we live in an amazing place, and I feel it's important that we protect it and preserve it for future generations. My daughter's now in her 30s, but I'm very concerned that of the quality of the world that we leave for her children, grandchildren, and so on. We are very pleased as BC Greens to have what we feel is a very human and planet-centric platform that we released this week. We're extremely proud of it. I'm extremely proud of the leadership, and I'm very pleased because the party really, I resonate with the party because the party really aligns with my value systems, and so I can support basically everything that the party is putting forward. I believe it's very strong, very robust, and our goal is to make sure that as a community, we're looking after each other. It's so important. Nanaimo has been subject to abject neglect, in my view, in the last probably 4 decades in terms of caring for our systems, our facilities, and providing facilities and care for people. We're an aging population. We're also a growing population, so we have some unique challenges here. Affordability is really crushing people. When I look at what young people are facing, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that our systems are built well, our facilities are built well, that we're investing well. I have a lot of concerns about where a lot of our money is going. I think it's very important that we are investing in the right things. An ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. So I guess that's about it for me, and time is up.
Thank you, Shirley. We'll move on now to Sheila. Thank you.
Thank you to the Regional District and the Hospital Board for hosting us. My name is Sheila Malcolmson. I'm honored to be on Nanaimo territory and feel very grateful to have made Gabriola Island my home for 30 years now. I feel lucky also to have worked with a lot of people that I see in the room on a lot of really good causes. And so much of what I've learned from community has informed the work that I've done, both in my ministry and my legislative roles. Lessons like working together, not giving up, caring for each other when times are tough. And times really have been tough. We are feeling that for a lot of people here, for a lot of people across British Columbia, across the country. We are still feeling the fallout of the pandemic. The climate emergency, global inflation, high interest rates, and real estate speculation have all made things worse, and that's right across North America. And so we've been working really hard, me, David Eby, our BC NDP team, to invest in people and taking action since day one. We've seen the impacts of that direct investment in Nanaimo already. 1,200 new affordable housing units that people have already moved into, 634 new affordable childcare spaces, more than 50 addiction treatment beds that you can access with your health card. We've upgraded 5 schools and more, but it is not nearly enough. And so we've also invested in the hospital. $700 million already has been committed through hospital upgrades, the cancer center, and a huge new long-term care facility that will be in the regional district area. All those will take pressure off the hospital. And then just last week, confirming that we will build a new patient tower at NRGH. And what's ahead with our platform released today? Just some of the things are free transit for seniors, protecting pets in rentals, expanding reproductive health access, improving transit for people with disabilities, and more investments in school and healthcare and the social infrastructure on which our community safety and economy sit. There is much, much more, though, for us to do, and we're not stopping until the job is done. A conservative government risks all of this, and that's why this election is so high stakes. The John Ristad old government caused many of the problems we face, laying off 9,000 healthcare workers, doubling MSP bills, letting housing speculators run rampant. And so we are going to work hard. We're going to talk to as many people as we can in this election. We know we can't afford cuts. We can't afford the risk of going back. We are going to remain laser focused on making your life better every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Dale, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dale Parker. Let's move this up. I am your BC Conservative candidate for the Nanaimo Gabriola riding. I'm a dedicated community leader, a proud Vancouver Island resident. I grew up in the Cowichan Valley and spent my childhood in Nanaimo and Gabriola Island and on Mudge Island, where my family purchased a property. This was our family project. We spent all our time there. We've had 2 large family reunions on Gabriola Island. These memories are some of the best memories of my life. I love the area here, and I'm proud to be part of it. I have 2 wonderful sons, Dylan and Cole, and I share my life with my friends and family and my partner, Christine. My experience is in IT. I have 32 years of experience in IT, computer technologies. I graduated in computer science. I also graduated from the University of Victoria in business administration, and I recently graduated with a master's degree at Railroads University. I've worked in the public sectors as a consultant, an advisor. I've worked in the private sector as a consultant, a technical advisor. I've led large teams that get stuff done. The Conservative Party of BC is founded on some key principles: good government, individual liberty and freedom, social responsibility, free enterprise and economy. We believe that a big, bulging government doesn't get things done. And not only do we believe it, we've seen it with our own eyes. The NDP blame game is over. From now on, the only people they can blame is themselves. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Pardon me. We'll move on to the question period now. As a reminder, candidates will have an opportunity to offer a rebuttal after all candidates have responded to the question. Question number 1, General, just to get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourselves, what you've done without pay in the past, and in terms of volunteer work, boards, committees, etc. Starting with you, Shirley.
I made a list. I'm not sure how granular you want to get. I originally started volunteering when I moved back from Nelson, because I actually grew up in Nelson. moved back to Saskatchewan to attend university, and while I was in university, I started teaching English to immigrants through what was called the Regina Open Door Society. Once I started working in the technology sector, I was a volunteer with what was called the Telephone Pioneers of America, which is a very large organization that basically covers all of North America. So we did all kinds of service projects over the years. I couldn't even list them all, but all very community focused. So I just made a scratch list here because there's quite a few of them. I did fundraising for Sophia House in Regina, which was a women's a shelter for women and their families who are facing domestic violence. I was on the board of, or worked with the Regina North Central Family Center, which was an inner city drop-in center for a few years. So we worked with at-risk children, youth, and families. And I was a volunteer at large. I chaired a major fundraising event for them, and I started a newsletter for them. Then I worked with an organization called Regina Care from the Core, which was focused on holistic healing and wellness. Later on, I volunteered with the Nelson and District Women's Center as a board member. I worked with Kootenai Pride on the planning committee and was an event chair. Worked with Heart and Stroke for fundraising, Community Health Initiative in Souk. I attended planning meetings with them. Saltaire Community Center Society. We attempted to start a community garden. I chaired their second annual CD Sunday, and
Thank you.
yeah, so I could go on.
The test was if you did too much to fill in 2 minutes, you're okay. Sheila, please.
Thank you for the question. Reading the question as in this community, then I'll only start for inside the riding. When I very first moved into the riding, I had just finished an environmental and resource studies degree and had been working in a sector of energy policy advocacy, particularly focused on ratepayer protection and specifically fighting nuclear power plants. But that was not in British Columbia. When I came here, I was working in a completely different field as a sea kayak guide and operations manager for BC's biggest ocean kayak industry. Ended up getting involved at a community level, volunteering on ratepayer interventions to protect British Columbians from the impacts of increasing electricity rates. We did citizen interventions at the BC Utilities Commission. Because I'd known that from my past life, we really had a super effective letter writing campaign. We worked with a group of retired professional engineers who were challenging BC Hydro's policies and analysis, and a lot of climate action engaged in that. But because I was very first elected to local government in 2002, I have to go back a really, really long way to look at a time when I was working with community organizations outside my elected role, and that's what the question asked. But I will say, in my free time, in between all of the meetings and all of the work that I do with community organizations, from Haven Society to, so many groups that I really strongly have relied on and drawn on their advice to build into policies and investments. I love picking up ocean plastics off the beach and pulling broom and other invasive species whenever I can. It's therapeutic and good for the environment as well. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Now Dale.
Yeah, I've been doing community work all my life. I coached youth soccer for 10 years. And I've done a lot of work in my son's minor hockey association. I've also volunteered for the National Forum of Ministers Responsible for Women and Gender Equality, the Terry Fox Run. I worked with Terry's brother, which was a big honor for me. The Legion, Victim Services, the Arthritis Society. I've also volunteered overseas in Nicaragua, building homes for the homeless and running a soup kitchen. I recently did a big volunteer project for a First Nations group here on Vancouver Island. I've done mentoring programs in the corporate world, in the corporate space, and I've done mentoring in my consulting career. And some of my friends, my best friends, I mentored out of school, and they're very successful today, very successful. And when they tell me it was because of you, it feels pretty good. I've also done a lot of work with co-op students and helped them after they've got out of college. For me, giving back to the community is very rewarding. It's something that drives me, and I do it because I have the ability to make a difference, and I see it in the results. Thank you.
Thank you.
For our next question, we will start with you, Sheila, and we're going to move on to the climate change and the environment. One of two questions on that subject. Watershed security and land conservation has been identified as an issue of great importance to coastal communities in Central Island region. What would you do as an MLA to advocate in the BC Legislature for local governments to be able to protect key watersheds that supply safe, sustainable drinking water for their communities?
Thank you very much for the question, and I recognize the advocacy that a number of coastal communities have done through the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities and at UBCM. The real challenge for us on Vancouver Island is because of the Dunsmuir deals and the Island Rail Corridor that we just have so much less Crown land than other communities do. So I think the voice of local governments and their association have been especially helpful and powerful. We have advanced, as the NDP government, drought management strategy, watershed security. We've done quite a lot of investments around particularly freshwater aspects of salmon habitat restoration. And so we've had a lot of interactions. Certainly for me as my link to Nanaimo City Council and to the Regional District of Nanaimo, it's my job to echo up into the legislature and into Victoria the priorities that they advance. We've got quite a good track record of doing that already, and it's certainly with my personal commitment to land and water protection, freshwater security. Really, I was involved at the beginning with the Regional District's Drinking Water and Watershed Protection Committee. I was on their technical advisory committee when I was an island trustee. So I love when local governments step up and take those extra steps, and I'd be honored to be able to carry on that advocacy for whether it's the city or the RDN. It would be an honor to do that work together.
Thank you, Sheila. We'll move on to Dale.
Well, watershed security and the water supply, I mean, what are we without it? It's one of the most critical things that we have. So that's going to be a high priority of mine, and so will the environment. But for watershed security, it's essential for environmental sustainability. It's essential for economic stability and for public health. Ensuring the protection and management of watersheds is a critical step towards a sustainable future. I will ensure that the watersheds are treated with the utmost responsible management, and I will advocate with effective policies and common sense to ensure that that happens. There's not going to be any destruction of watersheds on my watch. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. And now Shirley.
So I think what we're already have seen over the years is we've seen overlogging in the areas of the watersheds. It's so important to keep the biodiversity and keep the systems intact in order to preserve the systems and how they're meant to work. Nature is very good at looking after itself if we don't interfere with it. With all the clear-cut logging that has happened in the areas of the watersheds, it makes them extremely vulnerable. They're vulnerable to mudslides, erosion, and just losing the canopy of the trees as well contributes to the drying of the land. So at the UBCM, the recommendation was to repeal the act for the Privately Managed Forest Land Act and try to move the stewardship more into the hands of the RDN and into the hands of First Nations. The First Nations people manage these lands beautifully for thousands of years. They know how it's done. They know how the systems work. Forest systems are so complex, and we've kind of just looked at them as a resource, and we can't be thinking that way anymore. So we have to cut back on the logging. We have to look at reforestation. We have to look at preservation and restoration projects to maintain our watersheds.
Thank you. Next question, very closely related to the first one about watershed security again. Watershed security, environmental and land conservation is a key election issue. The Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region includes 5 watershed regions, but Mount Arrowsmith remains the most at-risk zone in BC and is a conservation concern. What will you do to advance efforts in the BC Legislature to protect and conserve biodiverse areas like Mount Arrowsmith in Central and North Vancouver Island? And we'll start with Dale, please.
Yeah, so the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy is crucial in managing and protecting watersheds in British Columbia. Community watersheds, the ministry oversees around 466 designated community watersheds, critical for providing clean water, as we spoke about. These watersheds are managed to conserve water quality, quantity, and flow, and to prevent adverse materials to getting into them. The ministry is also developing a comprehensive water security strategy to address the impacts of climate change, and this is around ensuring drinking water and maintaining a healthy ecosystem. And as well as for food security, which is a critical part of the Conservative Party's platform, is food security. So preserving the watersheds and ensuring that there's waters for farmers. We've announced funding for infrastructure, for storing water, additional water to grow food with. And the Forest and Range Practices Act, so the FRPA, governs activities within the community watersheds. So a lot of these existing provincial mechanisms are in place today. And so I would definitely think we would need to look at those and make sure that they're being managed effectively and that they're doing their job. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. We'll move to Shirley.
Well, I think, first of all, any at-risk areas, I think we need to enact protections over those areas. And there's many ways that can be done, but just in terms of legislation, I think we need to move forward with any areas at risk. There's often a focus just on species at risk as well, but we need to go beyond that, because as species fall, other species fall. It's basically a domino effect, so we need to look at the whole, keeping things intact and protecting what needs to be protected. We have overlogged and not protected sensitive ecosystems, so we do need to enact this in legislation. We need to really rethink our practices. Even in terms of forestry, there are ways to sustainably manage forestry, but we're not there yet. Ecoforestry, if anybody's been down to the Ecoforestry Institute Society south in the Cedar area, they're proving that we can log sustainably, but we can't just go in and clear cut. So there are practices. We need to be teaching foresters how to forest using selective silviculture. And it's possible, but we need to be very mindful of it. So there's an education piece in terms of public education, but then there's actually educating foresters.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Or Shirley, sorry. And now moving on to... And now moving on to Sheila Malcolmson.
Thank you. The biodiversity and the ecology of this region is precious, and it's also special. We know a lot about drought and about water security on Eastern Vancouver Island. This has been a real focus of my work when I was on Islands Trust, and hands-on around protection of some of these rare ecosystems. Coastal Douglas fir, we protected a quarter section and turned it into a nature reserve on Gabriola just a year into when I was first elected, and really grateful again to the citizen movement that made that happen. But I learned from that how hard it is. Locally, for the benefit of Vancouver Island, the BC NDP these last 6 years has been working really hard in this area. We've got a $100 million agriculture water infrastructure program that's working with farmers around using less water and protecting watersheds. We've made a $150 million investment into enhancing watershed security with a particular focus on restoring salmon habitat and creating jobs, protecting watersheds and doing the right thing in communities, working very closely with local governments on that. And also another conservation fund in cooperation with the BC Parks Foundation and Indigenous First Nations are really focused on protecting old growth and rare forests and watersheds. All of that work vitally necessary, all of that work at risk with a conservative government. John Rustad has said there is too much protected land already, and we know especially in this region, Eastern Vancouver Island, there is not enough protected land, and that's work we need to continue to advance together. That is at risk.
Thank you, Sheila.
We're now going to switch gears here to talk about the very important issue of reconciliation, and the question is quite simple, and I'll start with Shirley. Where do you stand on First Nations reconciliation?
First of all, we need to keep moving forward. It's a very complex thing, but we need to ensure that we're adhering to the 94 calls of action stemming from the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. There's many pieces to that, the act, and I will say that it concerns me when any leader of any political party in British Columbia suggests that we would want to roll back our Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. That is deeply concerning. We need to ensure that Indigenous people have the sovereignty, and we show the respect, that we allow them to set the pace in terms of the agreements that are formed. But we need to keep going forward, and it touches all aspects of life. It touches healthcare, it touches education, it touches land use, land management, rights to land, and it concerns me some of the practices that I see going on, even in terms of industry. When I look at sovereignty over unceded territories, and I see what's happening in terms of pipelines and in terms of the logging, and we can only go back to Fairy Creek and situations like that. We have been very bad at respecting the rights of Indigenous people, and we need to continue working with them, inviting them to the table, or having them invite us to their table, and working with them to develop sound policy.
Thank you, Shirley. Sheila.
Thank you. Shirley and I agree on a lot, but I don't entirely agree with what you said. British Columbia, by signing the DRIPA legislation, we're the first place in the world to legislate the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. It was everybody in the legislature voted the same way on that. And we have not just been enacting legislation, but we've been walking the talk. I think of with Nanaimo First Nation, in 2020, we signed an agreement with them to return 3,100 hectares of land, Mount Benson and Mount McKay, back to Nanaimo. Just this year, smaller, but even more important, arguably, almost 3 hectares of land right in the center of our community on the former Tally Ho Howard Johnson. That was an ancient village site. It should have been protected in the Douglas Treaty 150 years ago. It hadn't been, and returning that land is going to mean that that land can be developed instead of being caught up in court. And that's, I think, the big thing for us, is not to keep fighting what has already been proven in court, but to work hand in hand. And with Nanaimo First Nation, with the leadership of Chief Mike Wise, I'm so grateful to be able to work together on things like housing memorandum of understanding with BC Housing. The only First Nation that the province has signed an agreement to develop housing with is Nanaimo, because they really get things done, and we're building hundreds and hundreds of affordable housing units on reserve land. It's supposed to be the federal government that builds on reserve, but we need the housing. Nanaimo has the land. We're doing it together. We built a school with them. A couple of the school trustees are here in the room. This is the only place I'm aware in BC where a school district built a school for all kids that, again, is on reserve land. So we're working together. We're getting things done, and we just can't see that rolled back.
Thank you, Sheila. Now, Dale.
So John Rustad and the Conservative Party are incredibly supportive of economic reconciliation with First Nations, and we see it as advancing, by advancing their economic and social progress, this is a form of reconciliation. The BC Conservative Party is very supportive of the UNDRIP and strengthening Indigenous wellness. The Conservative Party will honor the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as it was intended. But we don't want it to be seen as an obstacle. And we want to make sure that the guiding principles of that declaration are intact. We will prioritize the transfer of authority of child welfare to family services, which has already taken place in the Cowichan Valley. And we will ensure that land is transferred back to First Nations. We will ensure that 20% of forests in British Columbia are returned to Indigenous groups to be sustainably managed and create economic opportunities for them. The BC Conservative Party has 2 First Nations candidates running in this election who are very supportive of the ability to be economically independent from the government, because they say that this causes them to feel like they're getting handouts, and they don't like it. So be clear that the BC Conservative Party and John Rustad, who is in that ministry for many years, we care about it, and we're going to make sure it's done right, and we're going to make sure First Nations are treated with respect and have reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale, and I recognize a rebuttal from Shirley, and you'll have a minute to present that.
And it wasn't really a rebuttal, it was just a clarification. My comment was based on statements from John Rustad, not in terms of Premier Abey. And these statements were actually made to the press, that first of all, he suggested that he wanted to repeal the act. And then he said he wasn't going to repeal the act. And then he said he might repeal the act later. So these were in interviews in the press. So these were statements, conflicting statements back and forth. We saw so much waffling, and it concerns me that if he's not going to do it now, if he were to get in power, he might just do it later.
Thank you, Shirley.
We're going to go into a discussion of healthcare now, and I want to give you a preview of the 3 questions I'm going to ask so you can make sure that you don't answer the 3rd question and trying to answer the 1st question. The first question is going to be on increasing affordable, accessible in-treatment addiction programs. The second question will be about the fractured healthcare system we exist under. And the 3rd question will be about local resources. So question number 1, and this is posed first to Sheila. What is your plan for increasing affordable, accessible in-treatment addiction programs?
Thank you. This has been the most heartbreaking and necessary work of this last 7 years. For the families that have lost loved ones, from those who have been on waiting lists, from people working on the front lines, just being exhausted, whether you're a paramedic or a nurse in the emergency room. This is the hardest, most wicked problem. British Columbia had, under a previous government, a deregulated addiction treatment system and insufficient public investment. And so I'm going to name some of the things that we have brought back, but none of it is meant to be a bragging list because lives are still being lost and it's clearly not enough. We have been in Nanaimo, as I said earlier, 50 addiction treatment beds that we have added that you can access with your health card. Before that, it was 0 when we came in 2017. And these are across the continuum, sobering and assessment beds, detox, bed-based addiction treatment, stabilization beds. The future-looking piece is that we have been experimenting over the last 10 months or so in a program called Road to Recovery at St. Paul's Hospital, where somebody who comes to the emergency room having overdosed can be walked right across the hall into detox, and then with under one roof go through all the stages of treatment with not being able to fall through the gaps. That's what we are determined to bring to every health authority, that kind of seamless system, so that people get treatment on demand when they want it. And we've also just most recently found a way with the existing Mental Health Act to be able, for the people that are presenting an emergency repeatedly overdosing and not looking that they can make good decisions in voluntary treatment.
Over to you, Dale Parker.
In Nanaimo, there's a very significant drug problem, as there is in the province, but in Nanaimo, the poisoning death rate is double the Vancouver Island average. For 7 years, we've watched the NDP government leave this problem unmanaged. They talk about where they've put money into the problem, but it hasn't fixed the problem. And we see billions of dollars wasted on things that aren't even related to services that people need. And yet, many people are living on the street with brain damage. They have access to free drugs. They're smoking crack at ice cream parlors, in the hospital, in seniors' care homes. It's frankly disgusting. I can tell you right now there's not enough being done on the treatment side of things. And I can tell you that giving drugs to people doesn't help the problem, especially when we see in Nanaimo here where they're ingesting drugs and smoking crack or inhaling drugs. It's also acting as a drug den for drug dealers with guns and large amounts of other drugs, fentanyl. This is going on right under your nose, right across the street, right in your community. And the NDP are the ones who are managing it, who are implementing these free drugs, who are giving them out. I want to talk about Brianna McDonald, a 13-year-old girl who passed away because of the drugs and the paraphernalia that the NDP gave out. Think about this 13-year-old child and think about the NDP's policy on drugs. It's wrong. This is only one of many thousands of cases. This is such a bad policy. We need to stop it immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Shirley, please.
So part of our platform is we need to continue with safe supply, because what happens is people are going to use drugs whether they have safe supply or not. The problem with an unsafe or a toxic drug supply is they die. They die in droves. So that is an intervention to get people or to stop people from dying. The safe injection sites are based on evidence. There wasn't just something that was cooked up here. This is based on evidence. It allows people to come in and not die from the drugs that they're being provided on the street. And that's getting even a lot more complicated now, because now with the addition of benzodiazepines into the mix, into the cocktail of toxic drugs. It used to be if you took a toxic drug, let's say fentanyl, fentanyl wipes out your with your breathing. It basically stops you from breathing. You could use a Narcan kit and revive someone, but it's not that simple anymore. It keeps on getting more complicated and more complicated. And of course, that has a lot to do with the crime organizations and where the drug supply is coming from. So our approach is to fund the safe injection sites, fund safe supply, but regulate it. We need to be collecting data on it so we know what kind of progress we're making. We need to be able to have people go straight from detox into treatment, and there aren't enough beds. We need to be investing more funding into beds. Treatment is not a one and done thing, so we also need to be investing in wraparound services. We need to be supporting families and individuals who are struggling.
Thank you, Shirley.
I recognize the rebuttal from Sheila. You have 1 minute, Sheila.
Thank you. I want to speak further to the conservative comment. An overdose prevention site, as he may have seen in Cowichan, the Cowichan Wellness Center, is intended to be entry point for people into the healthcare system. That's where we get them connected with treatment and detox, and that's happened very successfully in Duncan. And we are opening the same kind of thing right across the street from the MLA office. The concern that I have is John Ristad has flip-flopped on his position on overdose prevention sites. Depending on the audience that he's talking with, he says he's going to keep them, and others he says he's going to close them. So I'm interested to know, from the conservative perspective, do you not agree that an overdose prevention site operated by the health authority is intended to be not giving away free drugs? It's just not happening. Only something that is prescribed by a doctor. That's the only way. The Green Party position is different, but that is the NDP position, is doctors can prescribe medications, but an OPS is entry to healthcare.
Thank you, and rebuttal, Dale Parker.
Yes, so David Eby and the NDP are making this all about them trying to win an election. For example, at the Nanaimo Hospital, there was a drug vending machine where you could go and get crack snorting kits and directions, crack pipes. This is what killed Brianna McDonald. David Eby then, right before the election, announced that he was going to unplug these machines because maybe they weren't implemented correctly. Even after everybody knew this was abject failure. And now we're hearing David Eby flip-flop on the issue strictly to gain political points. He doesn't care. He's going to plug them right back in if he's elected again. It's bad policy, and it doesn't work. Thank you.
For our second of 3 questions on healthcare, I'm going to start with Dale, and the question is, what concrete steps will your party be taking to repair the fractured healthcare system?
Sure. I'm just trying to find that one. You're not asking them in order.
We did change it up a bit, sorry.
Do you know what number it was originally?
I believe it was number 6 originally, perhaps. No, sorry, Dale. I'll find it in a second here for you. It was 10 originally. Yes.
10, that's helpful, thank you. Yes, I have it here.
Yeah, start again.
For years, David Eby has been aware of the health crisis in Nanaimo. When the Fair Care Alliance were lobbying for a better hospital, Adrian Dix and David Eby were made aware of the crisis here. And Adrian Dix told Nanaimo no. Right during the campaign that we're currently on, David Eby announced we're going to build a new patient tower. When I was campaigning in Nanaimo, I met a father whose wife died due to the lack of a cath lab in Nanaimo. His daughter is a nurse at the hospital here. Sorry, that expression on that man's face was tough to ever forget. The NDP lied to everybody about this hospital. They've spent billions of dollars on wasted SkyTrains that don't get delivered on time. We could have had a shovel at the ground 10 years ago. We could have had a shovel in the ground last year, but they haven't done it. And they're only doing it for political points now that there's election. This is a crisis beyond belief. You can see some of the other hospitals. There's roaches running around in them. The NDP have mismanaged the health care, and this is a serious crisis with hospital closures across the province. People can't get doctors. There's long wait lists. There's problems with ambulances, ambulance service. This is a significant crisis. This is not a small thing. This is after years of mismanagement, and we need to stop it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. On to Shirley, please.
Sure. So our approach with the BC Greens is what we put forward as a dogwood model. The dogwood model entails putting in a health center in each of the 93 ridings so that we can create a center where physicians can work with multidisciplinary teams, whether it's physiotherapists, whether it's psychologists, and yes, we do plan to include mental health within that umbrella. In terms of neurologists and internists and kinesiologists, put them all in one place, basically, in one center. And we want to take the burden of administration and management off the shoulders of physicians so that they can do what they train to do, practice medicine. Also, when we look at how the healthcare system has evolved, we have a mushroom of administration and not enough people working on the front lines. We need more social workers. We need more psychologists. We need more technicians. We need more specialty services and internists. And so we need to be hiring these people, but we also have to be building the facilities. If we wait and we build 10 years, it takes us to build a patient tower, and then a few more years to build a cath lab, and a few more years, the whole room, none of us will be alive anymore. So we need to be investing now. We need to be looking to all levels of government for financing. We need to build all these projects. As I've worked with engineers for years as in my work in the technology sector, and we need to look from end to end how this hospital is going to evolve in the community, how we're going to build it out. You don't want to build one piece and then after start building another piece and then afterwards building another piece. We need to think of it end to end.
For your response. We'll go to Sheila Malcolmson for the last response and question.
So we want everybody to get the health care that they need and deserve close to home. We have been working hard across the whole continuum, the whole time from day one of government that we've been in government. And I'll start with people. So this is creating more nurse training spaces at VIU. This is removing barriers to internationally credentialed nurses and doctors. Nurses, we got 1,300 trained abroad just in the last year alone because we finally got the colleges to remove barriers. Year one, we removed the barriers to nurse practitioners. British Columbia was the last in the country. In 2017, we're now first in the country for using nurse practitioners, taking the pressure off doctors. We've funded more spaces at UBC, and we're building a second medical school at SFU. If only it had been done 15 years ago, we would be further ahead. We've connected 400,000 people across BC with family doctors. There are thousands still waiting, though, and we think that if we carry on, if we have the ability to carry on, then we'll have connected everybody that's on the health registry list by the end of next year. One of the other ways we've taken pressures off doctors, though, is by giving pharmacists expanded scope of practice. And then today's platform, our commitment moving forward, is also to give midwives more scope of practice. In both cases, they're able to prescribe, take pressure off the physicians. We've opened one urgent primary care center. We're opening a second one behind Country Club Mall. And now looking at some of the infrastructure, we built the intensive care unit that was named as the most dangerous in the whole country. The BC Liberals, John Ristad's government, got this advice. They didn't build it. We built it. We're building the high acuity unit. And we'll talk more about infrastructure in a minute. But I'm very concerned the BC Conservatives say they're going to cut $4.1 billion from healthcare. We need investment and not cuts.
Thank you, Sheila. And I noticed the rebuttal from Dale Parker.
Yeah, so we all saw what was going on with the Fair Care rally. We all saw that Sheila Malcolmson and George Anderson didn't show up and sign the pledge. When we talk about healthcare, this is what Sheila just said is a complete lie. We're talking about increasing money in healthcare. What we're talking about is removing the waste. For example, there are 73 vice presidents in the healthcare system now. We're talking millions of dollars. We're talking about bureaucracy that doesn't get anything done. We're talking about getting rid of the waste. And we're talking about putting patients first. We have a patients first plan that's going to follow patients. When you get sick and you need health care, we're going to get it for you wherever we have to get it. And we're going to make sure that you're not held up waiting on wait lists. We're going to get you the services down. We're going to make a system that works for everybody and gets people care when they need it, not down the road, not a year and a half later or 2 years later. Patients are dying because of the current state of the healthcare
That's time,
system.
Dale. Thank you. I also recognize the rebuttal for Shirley. Shirley, you have 1 minute.
Sure. So if you've been following the news, John Rustad actually talked about privatization, and to me that is a dangerous route to go. As soon as you start privatizing services, you're actually taking income out of the system rather than investing it in the system, as well as talking about sending people out of province or out of country to receive care. Is that really what we want? Is that efficient, to send our loved ones down to the United States or down to another province to receive care? That's not efficient. So we need to rethink that. It's very risky. Not only that, but then it also creates another layer of bureaucracy to manage it and administer it. So we need to be careful about thinking about privatization because it adds a burden of cost to an already strained system. We need to be investing more, not cutting from our budget.
Now, the final of 3 questions in the healthcare area. The Regional District of Nanaimo has one of the fastest growing and oldest populations in Canada, a trend that is expected to continue. We have a higher percentage of seniors than the rest of the province and a population with higher healthcare needs. The population and complexity of medical needs is also growing, while our infrastructure at Nanaimo Regional General does not meet modern standards at all. There are significant disparities between the healthcare infrastructure and specialized services available south of the Malahat compared to the north. Simply put, the distance is killing us. All three party leaders made campaign commitments to build a new patient tower at Nanaimo Regional General Hospital. If elected, what will you do to ensure a fast-tracked cath lab and patient tower move forward? And we'll start with Shirley this time.
I think we really need to look at our vision and to say we're gonna do this little piece and this little piece. The hospital needs seismic upgrades. We've known that since 2010. The hospital isn't even safe. So we need to look at the entire system, how we're going to expand it, where we're going to get the money. We need to get that cath lab. We can't wait until we've spent 10 years building a patient tower before we're going to start looking at the cath lab. We need to get those seismic upgrades. These things all need to be designed at the same time. Again, working with engineers for years and years, you need to look at the whole model, what this is all going to look like, what the facility is going to look like, because if you do it piecemeal, you can cause more problems in terms of how you design it and end up, look at Site C. What happened? Started off with a budget of $3.5 billion, ended up mushrooming to $16 billion because the due diligence wasn't done up front. The design wasn't done. In terms of the business plan, there was no business plan that we were even aware of. We can't build things that way because that's what happens. We build ourselves into a corner and then we have to take corrective measures that cost millions and millions of dollars to correct. We need to look at the whole picture. We need to expand services because we know as people age, as I'm aging too, and we start having a host of issues. So medicine becomes much more challenging as we get into geriatric services because people tend to have multiple comorbidities. So we need to, again, more doctors. We're in a growing community. This is the 5th fastest growing community in Canada. We need to ramp up. We need to fund up for capacity as well as staffing to it. We need to supply those services because we have to represent the people who live here.
Thank you. Over to you, Sheila.
Thank you. Very concerning in this election is the track record of John Ristad, who has a 20-year history of supporting healthcare cuts. Most famously, layoff of 9,000 healthcare workers. The largest single layoff in Canadian history all happened under the government that John Ristad was part of. They forced in 2009 health authorities to cut hundreds of millions from their budget. That led directly into a reduction in the number of MRIs, diagnosis, surgeries. That is the system that then we had in place pretty much when COVID hit. And so we do need more, there's no question. But from the beginning, for us to build the ICU, the high acuity unit, to have built in new endoscopy unit, new MRI machines, to now, then I'm meeting repeatedly, since 2019 when I was elected, to have the medical team at NRGH come and say, if you're going to build a cancer center, because they knew that I was pushing for it, you're going to need a patient tower. And so for years we've been working with Island Health to get the patient tower in the capital plan. Hospitals over the entire province need phenomenal and substantial upgrades because of underinvestment under a neoliberal government that did not invest sufficiently in public infrastructure. And so this is all what we are building up. I promise you it did not come up last week because an election was called. We've been working for years on getting the patient tower. As New Democrats, we'll continue to invest in people. We'll continue to listen to people on the front line about the investments that are needed, and also the healthcare workers to run the hospital. We know everybody's under tremendous pressure. We're trying to relieve the pressure in every way we can. Partly that's building more long-term care facilities so that people that don't need to be in hospital can have a purpose-built, safe and respectful place. We've got a lot of work to do, and we're determined to do it.
Thanks, Sheila. You're up, Dale.
Yeah, the BC Conservative Party just a few days ago announced a whole range of additional support services for seniors. So this is really going to help the seniors and provide better care and a better life for them. With respect to the Nanaimo Cath Lab and the regional hospital, of course, I just talked about the tower. But did you notice what was missed by David Ebby's announcement? And even here today, it wasn't mentioned. When I spoke to this fellow who lost his wife, he told me that there's plans in place to string up a mobile cath lab and have it operational in 3 months. David Ebby, he made no mention of that. You know why? Because he's not aware of it. You know why? Because he doesn't care. There's 1 million people right now without doctors in this province. Doctors don't want to come and work at this Nanaimo hospital because, quite frankly, it's a dump. There's no ventilation in there. You can't attract good cardiologists around the world to come and work in a facility like that. It's narrow thinking to think that you can have a facility like that and attract the best healthcare professionals to your area. It's nonsense. People don't work that way. So the NDP have a $9 billion deficit this year. $9 billion. The tower is estimated to be $2 billion. They could have easily got that hospital years ago. The shovel could have been in the ground years ago. We could have been years closer to having that hospital. This is a blatant disregard for the people of Nanaimo, and it's a blatant disregard for everybody else who needs medical services in the area north of the Malahat. Thank you.
I recognize a rebuttal from Sheila Malcolmson. You have 1 minute, Sheila.
So blatant disregard, I would say, is leaving the system in worse shape than the BC Liberals found it. That was John Ristad's party at the time. To now be saying that they are going to reduce healthcare spending to below 11% of GDP equals a $4.1 billion cut in the healthcare budget. We've worked with the numbers, the public numbers that John Ristad has given. So how in that framework is it possible to go ahead and invest in what we need right here in our community and across the province? I've been working since the beginning of my election in 2019 with the medical team at NRGH. They've been arming me very well with all the arguments to build a cath lab. In the meantime, we have been making investments in heart health. And I continue to push for a cath lab. But I'll say what isn't going to help is undermining the people that are working in the hospital. They are doing heroic work. And if we want to attract and retain specialists, we need to speak about our place with pride.
We're going to now leave healthcare and move on to taxes. The next question for the panelists is a combination of questions 13 and 14, and there's 2 parts to it. So right now, BC residents pay more per liter of fuel, gas and diesel, than anywhere in North America, impacting our cost of living significantly. So first of all, will you confirm your understanding of the BC's versus federal carbon tax? And secondly, what is your party prepared to do to reduce the profit gouging of oil and gas companies, and what other actions will you take to lower fuel costs in BC? And we'll start with you, Sheila.
Thank you. Working both at the same time on tackling climate change and tackling affordability these are not always compatible actions, but they're both necessary, and they're both projects that we have to advance. When the BC Liberals brought in carbon tax, we were the first in the country. Now we are in a place where this is federally mandated, and to be honest, the fact that the Prime Minister has really politicized the carbon tax by exempting the Atlantic provinces and then having an uneven approach has really unfortunately undermined public support for the idea of putting a price on pollution. In the meantime, we have a really good other regulatory tools that British Columbia has also been a leader on. For example, the low carbon fuel standard, which I understand the Conservatives also want to cut, but I think if they understood it, they wouldn't. It's really worked well, and we've continued to ratchet down carbon emissions using that tool. So we are, right now the carbon tax is a federal mandate. We don't have the ability to remove it, but the position of our party is that if the federal government does remove the federal carbon tax mandate, then we will remove it from consumers. We understand people are under a lot of pressure, and we'll move the price on pollution more to the corporate side and continue to regulate methane carbon emissions in the way that we have been continuing through our Clean BC plan to reduce climate change, while also keeping in mind affordability.
Thank you, Sheila. Dale.
It's true the federal government mandates the carbon tax. Either they charge it or the provincial governments charge it. But Trudeau and Eby, they're the ones who are making it a cash cow for their government so that they can waste money. David Eby announced at the P&E, which was just a few weeks ago, that he was talking to some construction workers, and they said, you know what, David? It's really expensive right now. We're struggling to make ends meet. And then David Eby went out on the radio the next day and said, boy, they're really struggling. I'm going to remove the carbon tax, and I'm going to transfer it over to big industry. The NDP have watched you all suffer for years paying this tax. I met a woman who has to pay the carbon tax on her furnace even though she can't afford to turn it on. This has been a big political stunt by the NDP. They know darn well that when they transfer that carbon tax to industry, it's going to filter onto you in another way. They have no intentions of stopping the carbon tax. It's a way that they get money so that they can spend it and waste it on themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Over to Shirley now.
So how the carbon tax is administered is federally, carbon tax is charged based on carbon emissions. And as when we're paying, as a consumer, we're paying for the purchase of fuel. Now, as far as transferring, what we need to do is we need to transfer the cost to the big polluters. And that's basically what our policy is to transfer to the big polluters. So more than half, I think it's about 65% of the population actually receive rebate checks, which many people rely on just to meet their monthly bills. We are facing a crisis of affordability, and a lot of people rely on those rebate checks. And what it does is actually transfers some of the tax burden to the large polluters, and of course then we benefit, those of us in the lower income levels benefit from the tax rebate check. What we're proposing is that we actually go after the big polluters in a bigger way. As far as taxes, we're looking at taking extra taxes from what we call windfall taxes from the most the richest people basically in the province, people that in excess of $1 billion, taking small extra amounts from their income and basically helping people in the lower echelons survive in terms of affordability. So it's kind of transferring some of the wealth to work on the income divide that we have, and that keeps on growing. Also, there have been some policies put in place where some of the costs that are being applied to the large.
That's time now, Shirley.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Continuing with questions addressing economic issues, As our MLA, how will you make rent and home ownership more affordable in our region? And if you're following along to the original question guide, that would be number 3. And sorry, we're starting with you, Dale.
Thank you very much. So addressing community housing, we have great news. The Conservative Party's announced the Rustad rebate, which is going to provide one of the biggest tax breaks this province has ever seen. You're going to be able to get a tax break on your rent, on your mortgage payments, on your strata fees. This is going to put a lot of money back into your pocket. The other thing that's going on with respect to the affordability crisis, again, this goes back to the carbon tax. You know, every time you pick up your daughter from school, every time you take your daughter to the dentist, every time you pick up a bag of groceries, you're being taxed. You were all taxed when you came here tonight, by the way. Everywhere you go, you're taxed, and taxed by this NDP government. So what the Conservative Party is going to do is we're going to cancel that tax, and we're going to implement the Rustad rebate. People are going to be allowed to save. People are going to be allowed to pay off some of these bills, and people are going to be allowed to plan for a future, plan for home ownership. We are taxed beyond belief thanks to David Eby and Justin Trudeau, and the Conservative Party fundamentally disagrees with that approach. We believe that your money should sit mostly in your pocket, and that the government should provide these services in a responsible, efficient, managed way. It's completely opposite of the NDP. They want to take all your money. We want to give it back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Over to you, Shirley.
So our approach in terms of addressing the housing crisis is we're actually putting forth that we will build 26,000 units per year. And we need to invest in housing. So we're looking at below market housing, non-market housing, social housing, co-op housing, because the biggest barriers are in the lowest income. So you look at the average person who's working, maybe making $15, $16, $17 an hour, a one-bedroom suite here is $2,000 a month. So how are people supposed to survive on that? Anybody that's on PWD or social assistance, forget it. They can't afford to live. So what's happening is they're spending any money that's coming in that used to be for, you know, your shelter and your groceries and your transportation, all those things. Now they're spending it on housing. So we need to be investing in affordable housing. We need to get people off the street. There are so many people that if they're not on the street, they're so close to being on the street. They're living paycheck to paycheck and barely surviving. So we need to make sure that there's plenty of housing available for people that can afford it. There's a lot of building going on. You drive around Nanaimo, there's apartment blocks coming up all over the place. Can people actually afford to live in them? So we need to be building the below market housing. We need to be investing in it. And in terms of the Rustad rebate, it doesn't benefit the lowest income people because the lowest income people aren't even paying much, if anything, in taxes to begin with. It only benefits when you're getting up in the tax bracket. Those are the people who will benefit the most from that rebate. It's not really going to help the people that are struggling the most.
And Sheila, thank you.
We can help so much if we get people housed in a way that is affordable and appropriate for them. And again, this is another area where we started in a hole, but to have already opened 1,200 new affordable housing units in Nanaimo that are either super, super low income or rent geared to income has been a help. We've got another almost 600 underway. That includes some of the first student housing at VIU than we've seen in a really long time. That's not just good for students on campus, but it also takes the pressure off rentals downtown. We have also The speculation tax was something that has already proven results. 20,000 empty condos have been put onto the rental market because of the spec tax. We've restricted short-term rentals, which I've heard of 6 examples in Nanaimo alone of families that were able to move into a multi-bedroom rental house that used to be a vacation rental. We have, across BC, we've created 300,000 affordable homes. That includes the 1,200, that's the 1,200 for Nanaimo were included in that total. We've made it easier to build and rent out secondary suites. We've removed local government barriers to building a townhouse or multiplex. We've tried to hit this with everything that we have. Oh, the 60-40 split. If you've got young people in your life that were feeling like they're never going to be able to buy into the housing market, do check it out. It could be a huge game changer. Really encouraged by that. But on the other hand, John Ristad has a 20-year record of defending the status quo on housing. He says every single one of those actions that I have read out, he will cancel. And that, again, would be a huge setback. He's promised to repeal all of it. His government ignored the growing housing crisis and the money laundering that was driving it.
Thank you very much, Sheila.
And for our last question of the evening, we're going to talk about crime and public safety. The BC Regional District Crime Trends Report 2013 to 2022 reported a steady increase in criminal code offenses year over year. Similarly, violent offenses increased year over year. Catch and release seems to be more prevalent in BC. What steps will your party take to reduce rising crime in BC? And this is question 17 for those on the panel, and we'll start with Shirley.
So we need a many-pronged approach to dealing with crime in the community. One of the things is directly related to housing. When we have people who are unhoused on the street, that creates a whole network of crime around them. So getting them housing and shelter is really important. When people are living on the street, they're arming themselves because they need to protect themselves, and rightly so, because like I said, there's a whole network of crime that evolves around them and victimizes them. So that's important to get people housed. There's a project that has been undertaken in Duncan, and it's called The Village, where they built a bunch of little cottages, and in those cottages, they've moved many of the homeless people into them. So they have doors that they can lock. They feel safe. Their possessions are protected. So they, by doing that, they don't have that need. When you're living in a tent, you're extremely vulnerable. When you're living in a shopping cart, you're extremely vulnerable. So in terms of crime, when you look at the organized crime that's going on around them, that with the drugs, with property crimes, with thefts, and those kinds of things, that goes down. With the Village Project, crime in the neighborhood went down 18% just by one project. So it's being creative, doing programs like this. There are ways to combat crime. And also in terms of legislation, we really need to look at these people. We have people that have gone through the system 60, 70, 80 times committing crimes. We can't just keep, in terms of catch and release, we can't just keep letting them out. We need to find ways in terms of legislative vehicles so that we can ensure that the police don't have to keep dealing with this. There's a huge, huge cost to our taxpayers to continue
Shirley.
processing these people.
Sheila Malcolmson.
Thank you. Public safety concerns that I hear, that I see from people in our community are unacceptable. It's no life for the people who are living on the street and vulnerable themselves to attack, and it's not acceptable for businesses and members of our community. This is a problem that afflicts Republican, Democrat, Conservative, and New Democrat provinces and states. This doesn't make it okay, though. And so we've been taking action. And the action has resulted, the 23 crime rates are different from the 22 crime rates that are mentioned in the article. In every measure, total crime, violent crime, property crime, homicide, assault, auto theft, break and enter, every one of them is down. It doesn't mean the work is finished by any measure, but I think it is starting to take some effect. We've established a repeat and violent offender task force programs that connect together the Crown Prosecutor, police, information sharing, that silos have been broken so that probation officers and our frontline police officers are able to share information on people that have been identified as repeat offenders. And they are directed into custody or into treatment or into hospital, depending what it is that they need. And a lot of them are incarcerated now because of working together on this. We have got more work to do, but I promise the very worst thing we could do is to elect a conservative government. Here's the track record. They cut when John Ristad was last in government, they cut the prolific offender management program that had been proven to reduce reoffending by 40%. In a single year, he cut social housing investments by 75%. In 2001, they cut hundreds of millions from the supports for young people in foster care. Where did we think all those people who were cut at that time ended out? We must not cut. We must invest in people. We'll have a better community and a safer community.
Thank you, Sheila. And lastly, Dale.
More of the NDP blame game. The NDP have been in power for 7 years. I think you all remember about the poor elderly man in Vancouver about a month ago who was attacked with a machete, and the guy that was standing next to him who had his hand chopped off. Well, that person had over 60 violent offenses, and he was let out by the NDP. Gang violence has been a big problem, and that hasn't been addressed by the NDP as well. This catch and release program and the policies that are causing it are related to the drugs and the mismanagement. There's not enough police. There's not enough prosecutors. Principal judges need to be appointed, and criminals need to be held accountable. The Conservative Party is going to make sure that there's going to be minimum sentences for crimes. There will be no more get-out-of-jail-free cards. We're going to make sure that the streets are safer and that people could use the parks again, because I'm told that in Nanaimo, nobody wants to use the parks anymore because they don't feel safe. People don't want to go downtown anymore because they don't feel safe. What if you're a business owner down there? That's not fair to you. You know, your livelihood is at stake, and these lax policies and mismanagement are the direct result. The NDP could have fixed these problems 7 years ago. Again, they're trying to make a promise on the campaign trail that they're going to fix it, but they haven't done it because they don't care about it, and they're trying to fool you into thinking they care. They actually don't. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That concludes the question and answer period, and so we're going to move into closing statements now. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing remarks, and we will go in reverse alphabetical order based on the candidate's last name. And I thank you for writing this down for me because I would have had to sit here and figure it out again. So Dale, please go first.
Thank you. This election is about the record of the NDP and how their failed policies and irresponsible government have harmed everyone in this province. At the same time, they've been lying to you. They confuse you and give you intentional misinformation. Their actions are dishonest and reckless. They are arrogant and they are untruthful. They provide patronage appointments and give deals to their friends and buddies. The BC representative for children and youth publicly have called out the many mistakes and shortcomings made in the Ministry of Children and Family Development. The death toll is not an isolated incident from the First Nations boy who was beaten and killed by his parents, by the parents that the Ministry of Children put in charge for this boy. There are between 2023 and 2024, The ministry received 6,437 reports of children in government and foster care being harmed. Nearly 3,000 of those reports indicate a child faced criminal injury or death. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the Ministry of Children, doesn't matter if we're talking about the SkyTrain, the $2 billion overrun on the SkyTrain in Surrey. It doesn't matter if we're talking about public safety. It doesn't matter if we're talking about healthcare. It doesn't matter if we're talking about social poverty and reduction. It's colossal failure across every ministry in this government. And you all deserve better, and that's what you're going to get with the Conservative Party. Thank you very much.
Sheila, please.
Thank you. Again, to the regional district and to the facilitators and the extremely professional way that this series of town halls has been organized. I have been grateful to work alongside the regional district, Nanaimo City Council, and many of the organizations in the community, feeding me the direct advice on what is necessary. In contrast to my fellow candidates' characterization, none of us would be doing this work if we didn't want to have the very best outcome for people. To have done this work during 2 public health emergencies, the atmospheric river that wiped out multiple highways, both the Coquihalla and the Malahat, unprecedented forest fire seasons, and to have been able to carry on with a very willing and hardworking public service to be able to attend to the immediate emergencies in front of us, but also to be able to build back up systems. We're building rental housing in British Columbia at twice the rate of Ontario. We're leading the country in reform of long-term care. The measures that we are taking on recruiting family doctors, 900 who agreed to leave to enter the family practice just over the last 10 months alone because of our renegotiation around fees to pay them a salary instead. Other provinces are looking at what we're doing, but oh my goodness, we still have so much work ahead of us. That we now have the fewest number of children in foster care in British Columbia's history, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, is a testament to the kind of systems change that we are working to do. We're working to do together. We're investing in people and wanting the very best outcomes for all of our communities. We have much, much more work to do. I hope you will trust me to carry on that work on your behalf. Thank you.
And lastly, Shirley.
So I just hope that you'll all take the opportunity to read through the platform that we have on the bcgreens.ca website. We're extremely proud of it. We're extremely proud of our leader. We know, Sonia Furstenau will work hard to make sure that we're getting the services delivered that we need, that we're making the changes that we need to make. As a BC Green, I have the authority as a representative of the BC Greens to represent you. Our party does not whip. We are free to vote our conscience. We are free to listen to our residents and form policy on the basis of what you want. Whether or not it aligns with our party line, we have that freedom, and it's a really important distinction between parties. We are focusing on people and environment. We're putting that first. We have concerns about some of the relationships with industry, and it seems very often that we have a situation of the tail wagging the dog. Industry has too much influence over the government, and we need to change that. We need to be investing more in people. We need to reduce some of our administrative and management overhead. We need to look at consolidating things so that that savings gets reinvested into systems and facilities and people, nurses, doctors, physiotherapists, mental health workers. We are very committed to investing in mental health services because a lot of the other health issues that we're facing have at its core mental health issues. So we need to be funding that. We need to be including that in our healthcare model. I'm sure almost any one of us in the room here have either experienced mental health issues ourselves or know somebody who's been suffering, and they can't afford the services. So we need to make sure that we're funding that. Oh, I guess I'm done.
Thank you, Shirley. That concludes the forum, but before I turn it over to Chair Craig of the RDN, I'd just like to, from this table, thank the candidates tonight for their performance and for informing us all about what your plans are and what your goals and vision is. I'd like to thank the audience for holding back on those unpleasant audience gestures and sounds that we were warned about. And I'd like to thank my colleagues here at the table for the great work that they've done. And now, Chair Craig from the RDN.
You stole my thunder, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to come and participate in Democracy in Action and hearing from our candidates. And please, another round for our candidates. It takes a lot of courage to put your name forward. And I really appreciate all of you coming to share with us. And a big thank you to our moderators, Kim and Jason and RDN timekeeper. So a recording of this evening's forum will be posted on the RDN YouTube channel over the next few days. We also, the candidates will, the doors will remain open for another half an hour if you wanted to come up and mingle and ask some more questions of your candidates. And other than that, thank you everybody for coming. Have a safe trip home.